This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Perfect day to talk some college baseball with Kendall Rogers, co-owner and editor of D1Baseball.com, the definitive source for all things college baseball. Kendall, I'm at Foley Field in Athens. It's a gorgeous day, and got the fifth-ranked Razorbacks and Georgia later on today, and I'm looking forward to it. How you doing?
I'm doing excellent. That was a really interesting song choice. I like that song, though.
Can I tell you, you can always count on Matty T, our master of music and a lot of other things, for playing the perfect song for the perfect moment, and I think that was it. Impressions of this Arkansas baseball team, because at the start of the season we wondered about pitching depth, and then we're shown reasons to worry about pitching depth, and then guys rise up and take the reins and we're not really seem to worry about pitching depth anymore, and might be getting a guy back in Brady Tigert this week, and man, the team's just rolling right now, and I don't know a lot of people that thought they'd be rolling the way that they are.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this in my column this week that, you know, this season really just kind of just shows the greatness of Dave Van Horn and, frankly, his whole staff. I mean, this is a team that, you know, coming this season, we're obviously really hot on, but, you know, you lose Jackson, you know, you lose Brady for several weeks, you lose Cody Frank, who obviously was going to have a huge role for this club. And, you know, I wouldn't say they haven't skipped a beat, because I think they could be even better. But, I mean, this is a team that, you know, in terms of the SEC standings, they haven't skipped a beat. Like, they continue to take care of business on the weekend. You know, they're getting big innings. I think the biggest thing for me is they're getting big innings out of guys like Gage Wood, who, you know, showed a big arm in the fall. They weren't really sure what kind of role he would have this spring. But they have just, you know, continued to really, really impress, and just the ways Dylan Carter, you know, Gage Wood, et cetera, have stepped up. So I feel like I've said this like 6 times in his career, but this truly might be the best job that Dave Van Horn has done to date in his tenure, to have this team, you know, sitting in a position to not only be a top 8 seed, but in position to potentially be like a top 4 or 5 seed despite injuries. It's pretty incredible.
Kendall, hey, I wanted to ask you a little bit. We talk a lot of SEC baseball here, but looking outside of the SEC, who are some of these teams that have a chance to actually win it all?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you look around the country, I think obviously the big one for me is Wake Forest. Yeah. You can make a very legitimate argument that Wake Forest is a better team than LSU. As of right now, they're probably more balanced. I still have more faith in like LSU's offense as a whole, but Wake Forest is incredibly balanced. They can really pitch. They've got 3, you know, big-time arms in rotation. They've got an All-American in Camden Minotti at the back end of the bullpen. So they're certainly a team to watch. I think, you know, East Carolina, they're a different club than they usually are. Typically, you know, this is a team that I think you look at and go, you go offense first. And this is a team that's really pitching first. You look at Josh Gross, you know, Carter Spivey, the reigning American Pitcher of the Year, and then Trey Yusevich on Friday night, who's one of the top sophomore prospects in the country. It's a really, really good pitching staff. The only thing that I guess my only hang-up on ECU is they're going to go a long time without playing a really good team. And what I mean by that is the American, other than East Carolina, has, you know, every other team is in triple digits in the RPI. So that is a really, really long time to go without playing an elite RPI team. So I kind of worry about them in the postseason a little bit. But then, you know, ACC, Virginia, you got Stanford, you know, out of the Pac-12. And keep an eye on a couple of mid-majors out there. You know, Coastal Carolina and Southern Miss out of the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt, as we all kind of expected, right? That league has done a really nice job at the top of it with some of the additions they've made. And then lastly, I think you look at Campbell. You know, if you're looking for a surprise, like a quote-unquote surprise name to get to Omaha and make a big run, it would be Campbell. Justin Hare continues to do a terrific job with the Camels. And they've got one of the best, pitchers in college baseball, and Kate Keeler on the front of that rotation.
Is there any level of surprise at what feels like such a huge amount of imbalance in the Southeastern Conference where, I mean, really over the course of the years, and it's not to take away from the success of Vanderbilt and Florida and South Carolina, but in recent years, the league has leaned towards the West. Arkansas, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, maybe A&M in some cases, Auburn. These are all programs that have been to the College World Series, and you got a couple of national champions in there as well. but there's only two teams in the West that have winning records in conference, and it's Arkansas and LSU. And, man, I mean, Kentucky and Carolina and Vanderbilt, Florida. There is an imbalance in this league, and it's not the imbalance that you usually see.
Yeah, you almost kind of wonder if it's one of those seasons where the SEC gets like 7 or 8 host sites, but may not get, 10 or 11 bids. You just kind of wonder if it's that kind of year for this conference like it was. What was it, like 4 or 5 years ago where the league was like that, where like 7 teams got in and all 7 hosted? I do think, teams like Mississippi State, and certainly it looks like A&M has kind of figured itself out a little bit. But there's no doubt this league is certainly in balance. I mean, you look at the top and look at some of the records, and you look at the bottom. What's really interesting about it is I just think the teams at the top are that good. I think if you look at the bottom of this league, Georgia won a series from Kentucky. They played well in non-conference. They've been just okay this year, very average. Auburn is a team. They can absolutely hit with anybody in the country. They certainly struggled on the mound. They can hit with anybody in the country. Missouri, they swept, Tennessee, and, this is a team that, really, Missouri would be fine, Phil, if they didn't have all these injuries. And the problem with Missouri is when you lose 3 of your key pitchers, that's really difficult to deal with. And so, their depth has been tested. But, all those teams at the bottom, they've got marquee wins. It's just the teams at the top are that good this year. So the question for me, I guess, moving forward is, does the committee view that as, this league is just really top-heavy and those other teams aren't any good? Or are we just thinking, like, hey, those teams at the top are so good, but the teams at the bottom are also pretty decent? I think it's the latter, but we'll see if the committee agrees.
Phil told me this stat the other day that the Arkansas went 32 straight games with a home run. When you look at Arkansas's bats, do they have enough in the lineup from 1 to 9 to make a run and possibly win the national title this year?
I think they do. I think the biggest thing about Arkansas is that, I actually like the idea, and granted, you don't ever want somebody to get injured, right? But I actually like the idea of them last weekend, against Tennessee, to where they didn't have Jared Wagner healthy, but they still went out there and won a massive series and swept a massive series. So I actually thought it was interesting. I think that's one of those kind of middle-of-the-season weekends where if you're Dave Van Horn, like, you're kind of okay seeing how your club handles not having that big stick in the middle of the lineup, and they passed that test pretty well. Granted, they didn't put up, they didn't hit 350 for the weekend as a team. They did more than enough. And I'll tell you what, one of the big keys for this offense, and I think this offense would be a lot different probably if this guy wasn't raking right now, but that's Jace Borfin. This is the kid that, when he got to Oklahoma, he was a guy that we all liked as a prospect, right? And he just didn't really pan out at Oklahoma. Last year he gets to Arkansas, still considered a pretty good prospect. And he was just, let's be honest, he's below average. And so this is a kid that we always kind of thought that he had in the tank, and right now he's showing what he kind of has in the tank. He's showing that upside that we all thought he had. So, I think, a guy like Jace, his like him emerging, has really trying to kind of change the dynamic of this lineup because, Peyton Stovall's gotten some big hits. Obviously, Brady Slavin is a dude. Like, he's going to get big hits no matter what. Josenberger and Kendall Diggs have certainly had some big at-bats this year, and the list kind of goes on. So I actually think this lineup has some pretty solid balance right now, especially once Jared comes back full-time.
Caleb Cali's emergence at third base, I think, is huge for this team on both sides because I think he's a better third baseman than I thought just watching him a little bit earlier. And he's a really good hitter, and that's another thing. You had Borfin, turn into what he's doing right now, and then in the last 3 weeks, Caleb Cali has been kind of exactly what you want from a third baseman.
Yeah, there's no doubt. He was one of those guys too that. When I saw him earlier this season, I thought he was just okay. But, sometimes these guys just need transition time. Like, not everybody just shows up in favor of Arkansas and just the switch just automatically comes on. I've seen it plenty of times over the years with the Hogs where you're like, man, I'm kind of down on this guy a little bit. Then all of a sudden, kind of like Borfin, you look mid-season the next year, and the dude just kind of turns on the Jets. And so maybe Cali's that guy too. But, I'm thinking back. Like, when's the last time Arkansas has had, like, a sketchy, like, left side of the infield?
Never. maybe
Never.
For a moment in 2020 because Casey Martin was a little bit unsteady at short, but that we never got to see how that played out.
But that right there is like a microcosm why Dave Van Horn is so good. Mm-hmm. So I'll look at LSU, for instance. You look at LSU last year, and I'll give Jordan Thompson credit, like he's gotten much better defensively. But you look at Jay Johnson's team last year, and like their defense was atrocious. And you think back to like all these Arkansas teams that Dave Van Horn had, what's the common denominator? The left side of their infield is always really good for the most part. And that's just, to me, that's a sign of a really good staff and also just a really good organization as a whole.
So I got to ask about last weekend before we just look a little bit ahead. You know, the series with Tennessee, it felt anticlimactic. Now, we had great crowds, great atmosphere. It was a ton of fun, and it was a great weekend. But that's because the Hogs kicked the crap out of Tennessee. And I don't know if that's what we would, a lot of folks expected from what was such a highly anticipated series. Tennessee right now is faded, man. That's not a very good team right now.
Yeah. Tennessee is one of those teams who looks like they had no idea how to handle losing. And you kind of saw a little bit of it last year when they lost in that Super. You could tell, like, once Notre Dame delivered the knockout blow, it was like, okay, season over. It was really odd almost, like how they just kind of laid over. I don't want to say they're like soft or anything, but like they did not handle that punch well, and I don't feel like they've handled punches well this year either. If you look at their starting rotation, Dolander, I know he threw sharp at times against Arkansas, but for the most part, he's just been average in SEC play. Chase Burns now is in the ERA over 12 in the Southeastern Conference. During the conference portion of the schedule, Drew Beam has just been okay in conference. And the problem you run into with your Tennessee, if your offense is totally different, from last year's club, which it is. There's not anywhere near the power, and your defense isn't very good. Well, your pitching staff better be really good, and right now their pitching staff is really average. So it's basically just a perfect storm for Tennessee. I do think when you look at this weekend, I do think this is kind of a watershed moment for them. I think if you look at, getting Vanderbilt at home, if you're in Tennessee after the Arkansas series and you can't rally around facing Vandy at home, your rival, then I'm probably losing hope on you the rest of the year. I mean, that's pretty much the fact of the matter on that one.
Just a couple more things, and we'll let you go. I would be remiss. I would have the listeners would have a mutiny if I didn't ask about what it will take for Arkansas to secure the national seed, top 8 that you'd brought up earlier. There's 18 games left. You're in a position where you might be able to lose a series or two and still get there, depending on how those series go. So in your mind, as someone who does projections for the baseball tournament, what do you think Arkansas needs to do to secure top 8?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Looking at Arkansas right now, I'm just pulling up Arkansas's resume in front of me, so I don't say something that's wrong. But I think when you look at the Hogs right now, I mean, sitting at 11-4 in the conference, I mean, they're in a really good spot. I mean, typically, I think that was at A&M last year. Was a top 8 national seed with 18 or 19 wins. It might have been 19 by the end of the year. So if you're Arkansas, you still have 3, 6, 9, 12. You have 15 conference games left, and you're already at 11. I mean, if they can just go into Hoover with 18 conference wins and win a game in Hoover, they're probably a top 8 seed. Because, the fact of the matter is if you're, right there with LSU in the West, you're probably being a top 8. And here's the other thing that really helps the Hogs and, frankly, helps other SEC teams is, I was talking to a Mississippi State radio show the other day about national seeds, and I said this may be one of those weird years where the SEC might legitimately get 5 top 8s. Because if you look at the Big 12, there's not an obvious team out of that league. Like, I don't think Texas has staying power. I don't think they're going to be a top 8. Oklahoma State's down to 39 in the RPI. Texas Tech's in the 60s, amazingly. If you look at the Pac-12, Stanford's pretty much Stanford or Oregon, if one of those two teams won the Pac, they would be in the mix. And, we talked about ECU earlier, and the problem I run into with ECU is the RPI looks good now, but as they continue to play RPI 140, RPI 170, RPI 115, like their margin for error is pretty much 0. So I don't know if I see their RPI hanging in there. So I think Arkansas is in a really, really good spot right now to be a top 8.
Sounds good. Hey, what about rules changes? The pitch timer's been obviously a big deal this year in college baseball. We don't have the rules that Major League Baseball does about shifts and about number of pickoffs. And then I wondered about, the whole deal with Scherzer yesterday and how pitchers get their hands checked for the sticky stuff. I would assume there's some college pitchers that might be using some of that same stuff. Do you see any more of those rules changes or the things that the majors and pro ball are focusing on that might work their way into college ball in the next year?
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see if the whole shift thing works itself into college baseball. And I think it makes sense to do it. I mean, if you have the shift banned at the professional level, like, why would it be, be teaching college baseball players to do the shift, do the shift or still do shifts before they get to pro ball? If the whole, premise of the sport is to, have a great college experience and then prepare a player for the professional leagues, it would make no sense to still have shifts. So I think that's one that will happen. I know baseball purists hate this, but I actually like the idea of college baseball getting more aggressive with, like, the extra inning rule. I don't think anybody out there loves a 5-hour game that's 3-1 in the 16th inning. I'm actually okay with the extra inning rule, and I'll say this is probably unpopular, but I've been okay with the pitch clock rules in college baseball. I thought earlier this year I was kind of like, man, I don't like this. Like, this stinks. But as the season's gone on, when you look at the average game time, it's declined by like 16 minutes in a college game. And if you're a fan of college baseball, and you're an Arkansas fan, and you're wanting the sport to continue to grow, you're wanting more Arkansas fans to continue to care about baseball, what better way to do that than make it a little bit more marketable product? And so I think college baseball looks like a much more marketable product this year because, we're not standing around getting out of the batter's box, messing with 4 different wristbands, messing with your elbow protector. Like, you're getting in the box and you're hitting. If you don't, you're getting a strike called. So I've actually been okay with it this year.
BetOnline.ag is your number one source for all your basketball info, stats, news, and scores. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest player reports for this year's pro basketball playoffs. BetOnline is always your sports information headquarters this season, as we have you covered for all your sports wagering needs. Basketball, MLB, NHL hockey, right down to UFC and boxing. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to get your betting info, including live betting options and your favorite casino and card games you can play right from your home. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Be sure to use our promo code BELIEVE to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's BLEAV. BLEAV. Bet online, where the game starts.